Welcome to Doing It My Way by Beata Matras, the show where we dive deep into various aspects of project, product, management, and leadership. And today I have a special guest from Gulf region, Aleksandra Krajewska, head of retail banking strategy at National Bank of Ras Al Khaimah and founder of the Polish BusinessWomen network in the UAE. With a robust background in strategy development, ESG, and digital transformation across multiple countries, Aleksandra is a modern leader and a role model for women in the financial industry. We'll be exploring the critical role of strategic leadership in financial services and the power of women empowerment initiatives within the region. Welcome to the show, Aleksandra.
Thank you very much, Beata, for a very nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Aleksandra. And I'll kick off from the first question. So, could you share with us the pivotal moments in your career that have led you to your current role at RAKBank?
Well, I think it was rather a combination of many steps, and I think the first moment was my studies at the Warsaw School of Economics in Warsaw, Poland. This was a very open-minded business school where from the beginning I had an opportunity to participate in many international exchanges, many international programs, as well as meeting people from around the globe. And I think this developed in myself the openness to different people, different cultures, but also to being brave and to opening up for new experiences. So I think starting and sailing off with that mindset, I was never afraid. And after graduating from the business school, I started working at Deutsche Bank in Frankfurt, in Germany. Where I was admitted to be part of the graduate management program. So I would say that was one of the pivots because it definitely exposed us to working in different banking environments, and I would say the biggest banking environments in the world, because it was Frankfurt, it was London, it was New York, it was Singapore. For me, because I was based in Europe, I got also exposed to working in different European markets. So this was Poland, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Germany. And having that opportunity early on, I think it gave me a lot of exposure. And back then, at that point in time, I was heavily engaged in technology, in digital. I was a digital project manager. I was a Scrum Master, and in the same time, I was implementing projects in all these different countries. So, having graduated from the program and then having worked for 4 more years at Deutsche Bank, I had very wide exposure in managing projects across the countries. And during one of these assignments in London, I met Sarah from Saudi Arabia. She was like my colleague, but she was also a person who inspired me about the existence of different banking system than the one we have in Europe, namely Islamic banking. So I was very interested by the concept. I started studying it, and I think it's I was reading some books about it for about 2 years. When I decided that I want to actually have my own experience in Islamic banking, and I took a decision that I would like to move to one of the countries where you can work for an Islamic bank to have that experience up front. So actually I applied for jobs in the UAE, and after about half a year, I got a job in the strategy department of Emirates Islamic Bank in Dubai, in the UAE, and I decided to move. So I think it was another important pivot because I have changed the region massively. I have changed my role from being in digital to being in strategy. And I also changed from working in conventional banking to working in Islamic banking. So looking back at that experience, that gave me another pivot and another wealth of experience that I'm using till date. Although, like, I progressed much more in strategic roles because then I moved to another bank to become a strategy principal, and now I'm handling the strategy function. This experience is extremely useful, and until date, it's like I'm a go-to person in my department, in my area. People are coming to me if they are having questions around strategy for Islamic banks. So if you're asking like about the pivots, yeah, these were, I think, the three main ones in my career.
Okay, that sounds like having the exposure to international banking and then Islamic banking and moving to Dubai. And I think many of our listeners might not be aware of what Islamic banking is. Can you share what is Islamic banking and how does it differ from conventional banking?
Sure. So, in principle, if you look globally, there are two different systems of banking. Conventional banking, which is something we all know from Europe, from the United States, and Islamic banking, which is banking that is based on Sharia law, and it's like compliant with all the rules of Islamic law. There are two fundamental principles of Islamic banking. The first one is sharing of profit and loss, and the second one is the prohibition of the collection of interest payments. So basically, if I mean, in Islamic banking, we are not talking about interest rates. We are mostly talking about profit rates. And the reason for that is that basically, like the person who is borrowing the money, they are making like certain profit out of that, and then this profit is being shared between the person or between the entity that is borrowing and between the entity that is lending. Also, in Islamic banking, you cannot have assets, or you cannot have actually financial instruments that are not having any physical assets. So it implies that there are certain financial instruments which do not exist in Islamic banks. For example, derivatives. But if you compare the classical bonds, then in Islamic banking, for example, you of course you will have sukuk, but sukuk has an underlying asset because it can be based, for example, on certain agricultural assets that are real physical representation of the asset. And on top of that, there is also certain types of businesses that are not being done in Islamic banking because they are considered contrary to Islamic principles. So, for example, in Islamic banks, you will not find financing companies which are producing pork, or companies that are financing casinos, any kind of hazard or alcohol. So you will have certain exclusions. However, I think largely you will find most of the common instruments that you will find in conventional banking. They will be also having the representation in Islamic banking. However, they are differently structured. And I think the biggest learning that you're taking from working in Islamic bank is like how to structure the instrument so that it is Sharia compliant.
Wow, that sounds like a completely different approach to and completely different approach from the traditional banking, but also a lot of new challenges. And how do you adapt to this dynamic nature of financial sector? How do you like navigate the differences in Islamic banking, as it seems really complex?
Well, I think it's the matter of learning upfront. So indeed, like at the very beginning, yeah, you have to learn different terminology. You have to learn how are the products, how they work differently, and how they make you money a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, I think once you have learned how you structure the products, then you start operating as usual. And I think one interesting insight is that actually, so for example, in the UAE, you will find conventional banks and Islamic banks, and they are simply existing to next to each other. So it's so it's not like because in Europe we only have conventional banks, so then in the Gulf region we would only have Islamic banks. No, you will have both, and you would have like Muslims and non-Muslims having absolutely free choice where they want to bank. And for example, for me, one of the most interesting realizations when I was working in the Islamic bank was that actually the vast majority of our clients, they were not Muslims. So people are at the end of the day, like you would have very small customer group, let's say between 5 to 10%, who, because of the religious reasons, they would say, okay, I'm only banking with Islamic banks because that's what I believe is aligned to my values. The other people, they would bank based on the bank profile, how good they are with the products, how good they are with customer experience. And at the end of the day, as I said, the vast majority of our clients, they were not even Muslims.
Oh wow, that's surprising actually. I didn't know that you have like also like traditional banking available in UAE, and that people have like a choice whether they want to go for Islamic banking or the traditional one. Um, that's very
They have
interesting.
absolutely 100% of choice. And you will even find like some banks which are both. So you will have banks which are completely Islamic, some which are conventional, but they are running also the Islamic business. So then they would set up something which is like called Islamic banking window, and like within this window they would operate they would operate banking within Islamic banking principles. So
Hmm.
it is absolutely flexible.
Okay, okay. And how do you stay compliant with regulatory challenges, for example, and changes, especially in Islamic banking area?
Course, there are like some specific sets of regulations which are only for Islamic banks, but they are coming mostly like from the because there are like there is like a set of standards for Islamic banks worldwide, and if there are any changes in these recommendations, then of course they are only applicable to Islamic banks. But I would say, like in the whole spectrum of regulatory landscape, these are like 5%. So really, the vast majority of regulations that are coming up in banking, they are applicable to everyone. Being always on top of regulatory changes is challenging, especially like in the part of the world where we are located, because you would have so many changes coming like from different parts of the world, and on top of that, it's like usually they are not designed here. So I mean, for me, it's kind of natural that if you work in banking, you have to make regulatory environment your friend, because this is heavily regulated industry. It's been like this for many years now. Definitely, it's been like this since I have started my professional career. So for me, it's like nihil novi. And I think like looking at the history, it's good that we have these regulations because we are also the industry where the most important value that we can have is trust. If people don't trust us, banking wouldn't exist. Banking is based on trust, and it's like to be a trusted partner, you have to be stable and you have to provide them security. And you can make sure like that the certain system is secure only when you are able to provide the stability. So I think you are providing the stability via regulations. And of course, there is I have been through implementation of many regulations, which we consider like ongoing thing these days. So I remember when, for example, the first Basel principles were implemented after subprime crisis in the US. I mean, the one that led to the financial crisis of 2008. Then we had like payment services directive in the European Union, which right, it's not applicable here in the UAE, but back then I was working in Europe. Then we had markets in financial instruments directive, so-called MiFID. Um, and certain part of these regulations, they are only applicable in the EU or in the European Union or the countries that are signatories. But for example, like Basel is now, I think, worldwide standard. So whether you're in the UAE, in Europe, it's the same. Plus, now we have a very proactive central bank of the UAE, so-called CBUAE, which is like both central bank and the regulator. And they are also very interested in having a modern and progressive banking system. So they are putting regulations and strategies in place which are very progressive they are definitely very progressive in this region, but sometimes they are even like extremely progressive when you look at the world. And once they put it as a regulation, you have to comply whether you like it or not. But the good outcome of this is like when you comply, you are getting like more and more modern and digital banks. So just last year we were implementing cards domestic scheme. So this is like a new UAE switch. So basically basically UAE has gotten independent payment processing of domestic transactions, the one that is independent of biggest schemes in the world, so Visa and MasterCard. And I think it's a very progressive solution because it gives you independence and it gives you upper hand in deciding on pricing. So if you would like to later on implement much more cashless economy, you can basically decide on pricing. You are not dependent on your partners, which are basically not headquartered even here. Another regulation which is being implemented right now is the National Payment System Strategy. And this is again like payments. As the first step, what is being introduced in the UAE, these are instant payments between accounts. And this is becoming mandatory for every bank. So I think, again, although you have to spend money and you have to implement it as the regulatory requirement, it is giving you upper hand, for example, against fintechs in the region, because what they are quite often offering versus standard banks is like that if you're making a payment, it will be instant. But hey, if now like all the payments in the banking industry will be instant, why would anyone get another app? And I think it's like we are having now the implementation in the EU of the AI Act, which is not specifically banking industry, and of course it's in the European Union. But I know it's like in every region of the world, including GCC, people are looking with a lot of interest at this one. Because the artificial intelligence technology, especially the generative one, once it gets implemented and when it gets into banking properly, I mean into our daily work, it will change the sector massively. So regulations are there, and I think they will never disappear. So I think the best approach you can have if you are in banking is just to make them your friends.
Yeah, and that's very good approach. But I'm thinking also about the innovation or like new kind of ways of banking and keeping your money safe. And these are like decentralized finance or digital wallets. Like, how do you respond to these market changes, like digitalization and rise of non-regulated financial institutions?
Yeah, so that's been always a challenge for traditional banks. And here it doesn't matter whether you are like traditional bank which is heavily digital or traditional bank which is like fairly backwards. Because in many cases, the newcomers, they were taking advantage of the regulatory arbitrage. So what it means that certain institution which is a bank has to comply with certain regulations, while certain other institution which doesn't have a banking license, but in principle does kind of similar things, is not regulated, which implies they can do more. And I think with like regulatory arbitrage, you can never win. So I mean, it's something like this. This is the area where you will lose. However, the question is like, will you keep big amounts of money with this kind of entities as a customer? And I think the answer is no. So even looking at the example of Revolut from Europe, yeah, it's a great tool to, for example, to have a card for payments when you're traveling. But in the same time, are you eager to put 500,000 on the account with Revolut? I think many people would say, okay, I'm not so sure. I would have to check. But how do you answer? So I think that the best answer is, first of all, is banks have to digitize themselves. So in many cases, it has already happened. I think here in the GCC, the level of digitization is not at the same level as we have it in Poland, or, for example, in another leading countries, which would be Turkey, Estonia. So, as you would know from Poland, for example, there is like no major neobank or digital bank which is stronger than any other bank in the country, because the banks like mBank, Alior Bank, ING, PKO, they were able to digitize themselves like fairly fast and like with a very good customer experience. Here in the UAE, I mean, the banks are like trying to catch up. They're trying to follow suit, and there are like some which have digitized like very fast in the last few years, and ones which they are the ones which have done it successfully. But I would say there is still like big room for improvement, especially like in the area of, I mean, in these areas where you have longer process, let's say, acquiring loans. And of course, banks have to be very good at customer experience, which I think is like the big area where the fintechs and the newcomers, they were always winning with us, because they were able to make the process very easy for the customers, which I think like many banks in this region were not able to do that to date.
But what about non regulated financial institutions? What can you tell about responding to changes here?
Well, I think this is a very big area. The first, so the first type of entities which slowly are getting regulated here in the UAE are all types of buy now, pay later providers. So I think they became very successful in the UAE in the last 2 3 years. And this was like a classical clash where banks were not able to provide this kind of solutions, because there was like gray zone in the regulation whether they should really do it or not, and at what conditions. While there were some other entities which were not banks and they were doing that. This area is slowly getting regulated. Um, and we will see what happens shortly, because yes, they were providing like very good customer experience, but their only solution to, I mean, their only upper hand to date was that it's like, okay, because of the lack of regulations they were able to do it. And I think now everyone will start really checking like how much debt they have accumulated so far, because from my personal point of view, I think that's globally one of the biggest risks that the banking sector is carrying. So there is like, over the last few years, this kind of like microcredit, small credit, it became very popular. But no one was underwriting the clients. No one was really checking whether they will be able to pay. and I'm not sure whether there was like enough of control, like of in how many BNPL schemes one person was borrowing money. So sometimes I'm like having my second thoughts whether it's not a ticking bomb that we might see being detonated shortly. Another area is wallets. So of course, these days, like many different entities, they are having wallets, and they are very far away from being banks. So, for example, like many people would have a wallet with their telecom provider, or with Starbucks, or with their like grid network provider, and so on and so on. Um, and it's like then because you are able to transfer money between wallets, sometimes you would have like money in your even like Apple Pay. And then the question is like, okay, what happens with the money if one day it is zeroed on your account? I mean, at the end of the day, you didn't have any banking guarantee, and you didn't have any banking contract with that entity. So this is the other area. However, luckily we as Rag Bank, we are getting into the wallet area. So I think these wallets, they will be much more secure, because at the end of the day you have a bank behind your money. And then in general, like going forward, I think we are having many providers of, let's say, instant payments, which here in the UAE, I think many more people will migrate back to the banks, because they will be able to transfer money instantly to any email address, to any mobile number. So it won't be that difficult as it was before. But looking at international transfers, for example, so it's like so-called remittances or like FX transactions. I think this was the area where banks were losing big time in the last few years, because the processes that they were using based on Swift technology, they were very outdated. The process was very difficult for the customer, and it was very difficult for the customer to understand, like, if I'm sending certain amount of money, how much money will get at the receiving end, by when, and so on. So there are many fintechs which have cracked that, and they have made the process easy, transparent, customer friendly. And personally, I think that will be one of the areas which will be very difficult for the banks to get back.
Wow. Okay. This amount of knowledge is like making me feel like it's hard to even like come up with the next question, because there is like so much to process right now. And I wanted to like take a step back, because what you're having, the knowledge you're sharing, and the kind of all these like connections between different areas like regulations, Islamic banking, and also like non-financial, non-regulated institutions, it requires years probably of experience. But I want to ask, like, what inspired you to specialize in the financial services sector? What's the story behind it?
Well, I think I was already as a child very decisive person. So many people won't believe me, but at the age of 13, I knew I want to study economics, and I knew exactly at which business school. So I was lucky enough to, it's like go to the good high school, and then like with having good results from my high school leaving exams, to go exactly to the business school which I wanted to go for. But I think it's like, because I like always liked economics, and I liked so of course I liked economics, and that's what I studied at the business school. That's one of my master degrees, but the other master degree I did in finance and banking. So I have always had an interest in that area specifically. And then towards the end of my university, I started doing different internships. So actually two of my internships were in the banks, but one was like in the industrial company, which was producing LED lighting, and the other one was in consulting. So it's like I was trying to go and work in different industries to see like what is my passion. where I would really like to devote myself. And then it's like after my last internship, I realized I really want to work in banking, but I was always like connecting banking with like the wider picture. So with economics, I was always interested in that area, and because of my degree, I was able to have deep knowledge in that area. So in my case, one would say it was like a very long process because for a very long time in my life, I knew exactly what I want to do.
Hmm, interesting, interesting. And I know that in your career you were having like a project and program management roles, and that's where then you moved to like Islamic banking, and then you moved to the strategy roles. And I wanted to ask about like your approach, taking into account your experience in project and program management, to developing strategies in this fast evolving financial sector?
Well, I think these days there is like two things. The number one is like change is the only constant, and the second thing is adaptability. Um, and these are the two things which would not fall into this category of what, but they would rather fit into the category of how. Um, so I think these days, and it's like with every few years coming into the history of my career or like how it's evolving, um, I'm realizing much more that it's like we have like I mean when we are educating now people, we don't really need to. I mean we shouldn't only focus on them being competent in the area that they are choosing, but it's also how they are applying this competence into their lives. So I think it's very challenging these days for people, for example, who like have like a lot of great knowledge, but they only want to resort to that because you have to change very quickly, and sometimes I mean you have to have this like mental strength to live with the fact that what you did like 3 years ago or 3 months ago and you consider it was like perfect and well baked, you will have to keep on changing that all the time. And I know it's like it seems like a little bit absurd to say, okay, it's like don't resort to that. But I think it's like it really depends on your personality, and it really depends on like how you have been taught and how you have been trained. So if you look like some people who, let's say, they pursue a career at the university, so for them it's like okay, if they have like developed something, it's like it's a status quo. But it's like in our life, nothing is the status quo. So it's like you really have to change very quickly. And I remember when I started working in strategy, and it was only 8 years ago. We had like planning cycles for strategy every 5 years. So it's like every 5 years we would have new strategy for the coming 5 years. So then it's like when I changed my job, I also joined a new company, and they told me, oh, it's like in our company we have a strategic cycle of 3 years. And it's like, okay, 3 years sounds amazing. I have just come. It's we are working on a new strategy, so perfect time for me to join. And then it's like it means that like in another 3 years we will have another strategic cycle. So I will see like in the coming 3 years what we have implemented, and it worked until the next strategic cycle, when we have realized that like 3 years is already too much. So we have decided that it will be like every 3 years, but every 1 year we will have like a review of the strategy, whether it's still applicable or not. And then in my current company, although we have like a review like every year, then you will have like a recap every 3 months and every 6 months, whether what you have planned is still valid or not. I think the biggest thing is like most of the things that you have planned, they are usually still valid, but new things are coming in, and you really have to be like quick on understanding what's coming and how it's going to impact your business, how you are going to react to that, and implement into your like wider strategic picture. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is like you start with a strategy which is, let's say, a component like comprising 12 elements, but you end up after 3 years with 4 times more.
Yeah, yeah. Especially in a in the technology and like financial space where everything is rapidly changing. And coming back to the topic of the strategy or developing strategy, like more staying into the topic of developing strategies, what were like the most significant challenges you faced in implementing strategies across different countries, and how have you overcame those?
So I would say the biggest challenge is coming back from the same thing which as I have already mentioned. So it's not really coming from what, because if you have competent and well-educated people, it's like they would immediately understand what you're talking about. And if they don't, they are able to catch up very quickly. But I think the biggest challenge in implementation is coming from the how side. And here again, I think that the first biggest thing is being able to manage across cultures, so cross cultural management. I know it might sound like very soft and blurred, but I have really seen like many people failing. So, for example, many people who would be very successful in doing something in Europe and then coming to the Arab world, trying to do exactly the same and thinking they are successful because they are using the same approach, the same tools, the same way of communication, and then being fired after 3 months because no one wanted to speak with them anymore. So being able to manage across cultures is the first thing. You have to be able to understand whether people are with you on your strategy, whether they are only listening and nodding the head, or quite the opposite, whether they understanding. And secondly, like whether they are willing to implement, because this is not I mean, even if they understand, they might not tell you like upfront, but they might not be willing to implement. So there is like a lot of your management skills going into like understanding what people are communicating to you between the lines. And I would say the first thing is like, how are you behaving? And it's like depending on the culture you're coming from. I mean, we are from Poland, and we are probably, and it's like I know it like based on my example. So in the Polish culture, we are very straightforward, and we are very direct in communication, and that's amazing. If I meet people like me, we are able to process everything at the 400 kilometer speed per hour. But there will be many people who are offended by your direct communication, and I think you need to be aware when you need to hold your horses. So that's just one of the examples. There are cultures, and this is the culture I'm specifically referring to in the Middle East, where like many people, they don't like to work under pressure. So if you are like pressurizing them constantly, then you will get only less output that you could get otherwise. So there is many dimensions, which, in my opinion, they come like to. So it's like I mean, when I moved to the Middle East, I felt like I'm reminding myself the course which I did at the end of my master degree, which was like we did a course which was for a year. It was called cross cultural management. We all thought it's like an easy course and maybe like will not be so useful in our life, but at the end of the day, it's like we are not giving so much effort, so it's like it's nice to have. But then it's like a few years forward, and then I realized it's like it's one of the most valuable courses and most valuable frameworks, because suddenly you are in the situation where you have to manage, but you have completely different people around you than the ones that you were always used to. And I think to be good in cross-cultural management, you also need to have very high emotional intelligence. And here again, it's like some people have it, some people don't. If you don't, you can have willingness to develop it, and then it's like you're proceeding better. If you don't, it's a little bit more challenging. But that's I would say like the biggest factor in my life where I have worked across so many cultures, because here in the UAE, although we are like in the Arab world, and many of the rules they will be connected to the Arabic culture. Um, like the local society, I mean local population, so Emiratis, they constitute only 10% of the whole society. So the vast majority of people, they actually come from subcontinent, which implies India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. And then, for example, if you work a lot with Indian culture, this is yet another culture that comes into the picture, and another set of challenges which you need to manage. Um, then I think a big topic is also like when you implement strategy, especially in the international organization. For example, when I was working in Deutsche Bank, there is like a big success factor whether you are working in dispersed teams or more integrated teams. Because I think that if you have like whole functions dispersed only into one country, so for example, if you have all technology development, let's say in India, but all the other people who need this technology, and they are writing business requirements, they are sitting in completely different part of the world, and they have like literally no connection to each other, then you have also like the best recipe for failure unless you are able to integrate these people together. And I think the third challenge, which I have noticed mostly when working with big strategy houses of this world, is that, it's like sometimes people don't have local knowledge. They just kind of tend to assume that, if I learn something at the university as a global standard, or if there is something I consider a global standard, I will just apply all across and it will be working. So the big exception here, at least in my region, is like, no, it won't be working. So you really need to make an effort and invest time into knowing the local market. I mean, how are the people? How is the culture? How they are ticking? How is your specific business and your specific industry in certain parts of the world? Because one size really does not fit all, and copy pasting from more developed markets to the less developed markets is also never working. I mean, it's even more difficult. I mean, it's even strange to say like, okay, now we have, let's say, this more developed market, and this is less developed market, because these days it's not even true anymore, because this like less developed market can implement a technology which is like cutting edge, and then they can leapfrog this more developed market. But what I sometimes seen is like in terms of strategy, it's like trying to copy paste a solution from another market because it has worked there, so it will be working here, without making like I would say with making too many jumps over like will that fit or not. And I think it's like one of the other biggest challenges for some people, either to not to take this approach, or it's a challenge for them to understand that they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, and that's also interesting because you talked a lot about the cross-cultural collaboration, but also about relationship building and team building. And I want to move to the part of actually founding the Polish Businesswomen Network. What inspired you to found the Polish Businesswomen Network, and what impact has it had in the Gulf region?
So my inspiration were actually Polish women who I was meeting all across here in the UAE, and probably also some of my personal experiences back then. So when I came to the region in 2016, I think without not too much of exaggeration, in the first 2-3 years when I was meeting, when I was socializing with people from the Polish community, they would just bluntly assume from the beginning that if I'm living here in the UAE, I'm either a housewife or I'm a cabin crew. There was like no other option. And in the same time, I was like meeting so many women with a lot of interesting experience from before, and also like with a lot of new experience which they were gathering in the UAE. They were running different businesses and opening up new functions and so on. So I think that was like, one of the sparks. And the second one was that back then we didn't have a single professional Polish organization in the UAE, which would be like for the Polish professionals. I was already a member of a German network. So it was I think it was called German Business Council. And then I had a thought, it's like, why don't we have something the Polish way? And because, of course, it's like I was going to run it as, as part of my, let's say, side hobby, or it's like as my individual yet additional initiative to what I'm doing professionally. I have decided that, founding something which will be for the Polish women is really something close to my heart, and in the same time, it is feasible for me to do while I'm still very active in the professional life. So I have founded Polish Business Women Network in 2020. So this year we will be having like our fourth anniversary. Currently, we have about 60 permanent members and 40 in the process of being admitted. And the number of members is growing. We are not even doing I mean, of course, we have always recruitment ongoing, but we are not even doing any advertising, and we still have many more requests to join than we are able to process. So I think it only shows like how many amazing professional women we have here in the UAE, Polish speaking, basically. Because you could say we are all Polish, and yes, we are, but some of us, they have like dual nationalities. It's very important for us that whoever comes is speaking Polish, because we are running our meetings in Polish, and this is like our common ground. But there is like many different pathways. And what I wanted to say is like we have really many representatives of very senior leaders. Many Polish ladies who are, at the level of management board and managing directors. So it is all the span from the people who are like senior analysts to the people who are the CEOs.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So we are having both, women in professional careers in the corporations, but we are also having women who have founded their own big businesses. So both professionals and business owners.
And there is like a huge need in the industry, in the business right now, for setting up these kind of communities. Like women finally, I think, want to support women and feel the need of actually like collaborating together and seeing the power of the communities. But in your view, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities for women advancing in business today?
Well, I have probably very unconventional view of that, because for me, it's like I have never felt not supported by other women. So for me, it was always kind of indifferent. Either I was supported or not supported, but it wasn't like I was getting any other treatment from women specifically. So, for example, like in terms of the network that I have founded, I have done it out of pure passion, and I have done it also out of realization that I am meeting so many of them in the informal settings where we don't really have opportunity to talk about business and to have deeper conversations into that. So that was also one of the reasons why founded this platform because this is really the place where you would learn to the latest nitty gritty of another person's business or the role if you want to. And of course, we are organizing meetings around it. But like the feedback I have gotten from many of my members is that it's like they are extremely happy that this is the network for women only, because finally they have a space when they can talk freely without the fear of being like judged or mansplained. And I think this is like one of the valid reasons which I would bring, like what are the biggest challenges for women. So I think that honestly, in terms of like pure access to education or working in the role you want to work in, there is really limited number of hurdles for women these days in business. However, I think it's again in the what, not in the what, but it's more in the how. So I think one of the big issues lies in this kind of mansplaining and patronizing women in the workplace. And I know that many of them hate that, and for them, sometimes it's becoming like the reason to take a step back because they have the feeling that their competences are being undermined, and their input into the whole business is not properly appreciated. So if they don't feel appreciated, then they are leaving the workplace, and because of that they are not progressing. So I think it's definitely the case, and I think it's definitely something that is holding many women back. Another thing that I would consider is like one of the hurdles. It's parenthood, motherhood. It can become limiting because it's like this is a heavy loading on duties. So it's definitely working much better for both partners if you are able to make your partner a real partner, not only like 5 or 20% of a partner. And I think the last factor is the work flexibility. So I definitely believe that, especially in the times of AI, workplace automation, and when so many things are digital, you don't have to be physically in office at any given point in time, and that the work can be done like efficiently in a more like dispersed manner when we look at it time wise. So I think this would be the biggest challenges, and the biggest opportunities. Well, honestly, I would say they are exactly the same. Like for men, maybe like it's important for women to really have a look at the area in which they decide to pursue their career, because it's always easier to go with the flow. So go, for example, with the things that are like coming new, or which are trending, or which are like in the biggest development at any given point in time.
That's interesting. That's interesting, really. I mean, especially around, parent, being a parent, having like choosing a partner, and also about like men and women having equal opportunities. Kind of agree, but on the other hand, I think it's again about, the community also support. Yeah, we tend to, as human beings, have a lot of biases, I'd say. Even and very often, biases are so dangerous because we don't kind of realize that we have them. I mean, I have a lot of biases I didn't know, and until I started like talking with different people, with different um, meeting like different individuals who like made me aware that, oh, well, actually, I might have that bias towards, I don't know, the competences, for example, of my friends, or asking my male colleague for explaining me something rather than a female colleague. Of course, I'm trying to change that. And right now, like I see women are really great specialists, and they are like even when I'm like thinking about myself, yeah, I was like doubting in myself very much because I thought I'm not good enough. But the more I'm speaking with the individuals, with women and men, the more I kind of also start seeing it's not true what I've been told like for so many years, or what we've been told for so many years. And I wanted to ask you about the advice. What advice would you offer to professionals, especially women who aspire to leadership roles but doubt their competence?
That's a very difficult question because I'm not able to answer it from autopsy. I have never doubted in myself. I would say, like, first, try to look for some, very straightforward evidence of your competence. I think that in today's world, we quite too often mix competence with confidence. Because what I realize, and here I have to say, probably even without any bias, I'm meeting way many more men who are very confident, but at the second sentence, I already see they are not competent. And then the other way around with women, who is like, who would start the sentence from like, I'm not sure if I'm really a specialist in this one, but, and then there is hell of knowledge. So if you are that person who is like, who is not, I mean, usually, like, if you are confident, then you can confident and competent, then it's like you will not be doubting yourself. So you must be like competent but not confident. And then I think this is kind of an area that if you self self assess with yourself, that's the area of development. And I think it's like, first, it's good to verify it with data. So, for example, like, if you think that you are competent in accounting, let's say, for example, take certain courses, examinations, and prove yourself with the data that is like, these things, right? Or if it's not so straightforward, like, do the projects which are in this area and like prove yourself, like, how to implement the project from A to B. For example, you're responsible for implementing a new digital app. So if you implemented the app is in the App Store or Google Store and it's working for the customer, then definitely you are competent in what you are doing because it's working for so many customers. So I would say it's like, one, get the verification with the data. Second thing is, like, I would say, get your person. I mean, and this is only all for your personal feeling, right? Because no one else needs it. The second thing I would say, get your confirmation with other people who you think they are, in your eyes, specialists in these areas. And usually it's kind of the best to get it from your colleagues, right? Because they are the ones who are working with you. So if you know, like, any senior person, so for example, you work in payments, but you would say, oh, I'm not so sure I'm competent about payments. Then, I mean, go and talk to person who is like, senior executive in your area, in the company. And it's like, ask them a lot of questions because probably you want to learn more. But then based on that conversation, you will understand like how competent you are in that area and what are your areas of development. But I think it's like, there is also an issue sometimes, in the psychological side of things in that area. So I think we are luckily living in the times where we have a lot of access to professionals in that area, be it like, coaches, be it psychologists. So I would say, like, go to the well-educated, well-equipped person from that area, like to the specialist, and learn with them how to cope with that. Because I think it's like, it's nice, you will have that proofs which I have mentioned, like by the so because of the because of the, let's say, activities or tasks that you have done before, you will have a confirmation with data that, yes, I can do this, I can do that. But there is like also a small fix in your mind that has to be done. And I think it's like, if you work with another person who can support you from that perspective, it it promises a more of a long-term solution.
Like asking someone for help, like a professional coach, for example, can be very useful for building our confidence and get rid of, limiting beliefs or doubt in our competences. That's sometimes very helpful. Although I think the crucial thing in building the confidence is actually action. I mean, trying to do things, even if we are not, even if we're scared, or even if we think we fail, like just do it. Yeah. And then you'll see. And after each action like that, like a small challenge, you become more and more and more aware of how much you've already done when you like look back in like 5 or 10 years, back of the place where you've been and where you're now.
Whatever works for you. It's like I don't have here the perfect solution, and I'm also like, not a specialist, but I think it's like this would be the logical steps which I would follow if I was in this situation.
And they are very helpful. They are working, definitely, like asking questions, getting the feedback, and building the competence is crucial.
So look, for example, for me, like I work in strategy function, and it implies that I work in. So, for example, in my current role, I have 11 businesses. There are different 11 business lines, and some of them they are like credit cards, so which is like payments, but with a credit behind. Then you would have typical payments, you would have loans, you would have insurance, and so on and so on. 11 in total. They are all having very specialized business heads who are running them, and I'm a strategy person who has to connect everything together, which implies that I'm not a specialist in each and every of this business. So usually when I work on the strategy, I have much more learning to do than really like telling people what they should be doing. Once I have worked with them, prepared strategy papers, something, it's like I'm always going to them and say, please read, verify, tell me where I'm wrong. Uh, and for me, it's like, I'm okay to be said, it's like, I'm wrong, you are wrong in this one. Here, I think we can fix it, because for me, it's like natural process of learning and improving myself. But it's also like, that good to have this feeling where I am competent, and it's like I'm competent to feel where I can be incompetent. So yeah, it's like, but never doubt yourself, because I think it's like this is exactly what you should do. So it's like if you doubt yourself whether you're incompetent in something, go to the person who you consider competent in that area and ask them. And that's what I am also doing. It's like if I have worked on something and I think it's perfectly okay based on my knowledge, but then I'm going and asking, do you think it's all okay? Tell me where I'm lacking something.
That's also very helpful. Yeah, like seeking for kind of even like a mentorship, or the guidance from someone you see as the role model, or as the experienced professional.
Yes, and I think this is really something that is helping many women, and this is also something where they have much more of a natural tendency to do than men. So I believe like if you start doing this, and if you have your circle of men, women, whoever you consider great and competent, where you will have that kind of honest conversations. This is really something that's opening up people towards you. And this is really something that's helping you to develop in your career.
Thank you, Alexandra, for sharing that. And to wrap up our conversation, I wanted to ask you about what's the one thing you're most looking forward to achieving or experiencing this year, either professional or personal?
Oh, wow. It's like I always have so many plans, but I think maybe I will mention two. My number one thing is I think that this year is finally the year when I will have enough space in my life to launch financial education platform in the UAE, which I was thinking of for a very long time. But I think we are living now in the world where the knowledge about how to manage your finances, how to maneuver during your life over different like financial obstacles, financial decisions, and how to manage long time. This kind of knowledge became absolutely necessary, but we have never been taught it. And also, it's like usually we are getting it from different types of financial advisors who are unfortunately representatives of different companies. So they have also sales targets, and some of the reasons to propose you certain solutions or not. So this will be a big project, and I hope that this year I will be able to launch it here in the UAE. And the second thing that I'm really looking forward to is to expand Polish BusinessWomen network to Saudi Arabia. This will be our second country of operation. But with the current growth of Saudi, with the number of projects that are being launched there, and with the number of people who are moving to KSA, I think it will be like a very pivotal stone in our development and how we will be able to be represented in the region, but also to have great insights from I would say like the most booming economy in the GCC these
Wow,
days.
it sounds like Polish women are running the world or, or trying to run the world. Yeah.
We are definitely one of the women who are
Yeah.
doing this.
Yes.
Yes, one of the
Great to hear
groups.
that. Really great to hear that. I'm feeling very inspired and empowered by that. And yeah, it's really exciting to see that change happening. The last question, Aleksandra, for our listeners interested in connecting with you, where they can find you online and in what ways you can assist or provide support to them.
So for now, I would say the best way to get in touch with me is via my LinkedIn profile, which you will also find exactly under the name I'm presenting myself here in the podcast. And once I'm also ready with my financial education platform and with the social media that will be standing behind that, then I will definitely also post them on LinkedIn. So this will be the new channels of communication as well.
Thank you, Aleksandra. I wish you a lot of success with your financial education platform and also with Saudi Arabia plans for Polish Businesswomen Network. I know that you'll do that for sure, and you'll succeed in every kind of endeavor that you planned, or every initiative that you planned. So thank you for our conversation. I enjoyed it really much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Beta. It was a pleasure, and looking forward to connect with the listeners as well.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of Doing It My Way by Beata Matras. If you enjoyed this episode, please do not forget to subscribe. Remember, this podcast is a dynamic journey and your feedback is very welcomed. Connect with me on social media. I would like to hear your thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions. And stay tuned for upcoming episodes. And until next time, keep doing it your way.